Continuing our reading in Yellow Eyes by Rutherford Montgomery, today is Chapter 5, The Striped Brother. In those first days of unguided wandering, Yellow Eyes showed the traits inherent within a great killer. He did not whimper when caught in a drenching downpour of icy rain. He attacked a jackrabbit and pulled it down when hunger tightened his little belly. He was truly the king cat in the making. In his small mind lingered the picture of Cougar George, the human, standing over his hounds, shouting encouragement to them as they destroyed his little brothers. This, too, marked him as the unusual, the individual among his fellows, who might live long and avenge the death of many of his kind. Nature is a harsh teacher and pays small heed to the individual, crushing him if he dares a violation of her rules. The thing which kept Yellow Eyes alive during those first weeks alone in the barrens was the thing which was bent upon destroying him and his kind, Cougar George. The predatory animal exterminator was hired to kill every hunter in the high country. He waged a ruthless war against the coyote, the wolf, and the cougar, as well as any other animal upon which the stamp of disapproval had been placed by a great government of men. His most vicious victim was the coyote. His traps and poison had thinned the ranks of those stealthy roamers until few were left. With the coyote slain, the great jackrabbits of the lower ranges had multiplied and spread until even in the high country, the head of every canyon and gully harbored several of them. This made hunting easy for Yellow Eyes. His first hunger-mad attack had shown him that he was more than a match for a sleeping jack. The killing of the coyotes, with its resultant pest of rabbits, was giving Cougar George, the human, trouble. He had sent word down the mountain to his superiors that he must have poison to destroy the rabbits, which meant poison to destroy much other rodent life and many birds. Yellow Eyes grew until he was larger than the biggest bobcat on the mountain. He learned many things he was later to find useful. He came to know that the owl is a dangerous opponent and that the skunk is to be avoided. His meeting with the aromatic one came about on a summer evening. Yellow Eyes had been shown that his kind had no safety by daylight and must hunt in the dusk of the late twilight or in the cold dawn of the new day. He met the striped one on a narrow path. Yellow Eyes had developed a lordly manner with lesser animals, most of whom fled when they scented him. The skunk was ambling up the trail with his brush held high and his pointed nose lowered. He was paying no attention at all to those about him. A lynx cat had just yielded the trail to him without protest. He had not so much as looked at the big fellow. The dull wits were centered upon the dinner he planned to get for himself. A few frogs from a muddy spring and a mouse or two from under a rotting log. Yellow Eyes saw him coming and measured his size with a scornful hiss. The striped one came on at an ambling walk. Yellow Eyes arched his back and spat. He laid back his ears and planted himself in the trail. The skunk was mildly surprised. Then he sensed, in his dumb way, that here was an animal who did not know the rules of the trail. He paused and stared at Yellow Eyes. His brush lifted and he swung about. This was a fighting sign and should have sent Yellow Eyes bounding down the slope. All it did was to stir another hiss from the young hunter. The striped one let fly a meager few drops of pungent musk. One of those drops struck Yellow Eyes squarely above his little nose. It splattered, and instantly the little king cat was stifled by a reeking odor which almost strangled him. He leaped aside and bounded over a brush. From the security of a rosebriar, he peered out at the striped one. The skunk was peacefully ambling up the trail as though he had never been challenged. Yellow Eyes rubbed his head in the grass and wiped his face with one paw, but he could not free himself from the powerful odor. His sensitive nose membranes burned, and the smell sickened him. Angrily, he ate several spears of grass, then fell to washing his face again. The smell of musk clung to him for days, an irritating reminder of the encounter, a very definite lesson learned by every hunter. None can test the striped brother. While Cougar George the human and his pack had not crossed the trail of the young hunter, another white man had seen him several times. Treon, a Kamochomi Indian boy, had watched Yellow Eyes pull down a big rabbit at the edge of a clearing one night at dusk. A wide smile had played over Treon's dusky features. The baby Chimbeka strikes like the old one. He will do the watch. Treon thought of Cougar George, the human, and his features drew into a frown. If the young cat could only be taught not to climb a tree when attacked by dogs, such a one would be a king indeed. He could be an everlasting worry to the hunter who slew to be killing, to exterminate, and never for the food he ate, or the skins he must have to wear. Treon watched Yellow Eyes until the dusky purple shadows had swallowed up the scene. At last, on moccasin-padded feet, he returned to the little cabin to lie down upon a bed of fragrant pine boughs. Treon felt that Cougar George was his natural enemy. The government hunter killed for the sake of destruction. He destroyed without thought of need or use. Treon was aware that nature kills ruthlessly. The deer and the mountain sheep are the natural prey of the cougar and the wolf. The rabbit and the grouse come to cruel ends from the eagle of the air and many killers on the ground. Yet Treon knew that this was all a part of the system of checks and balances. Man came and upset this neat balance, and the wilderness life fled before him or perished. Treon turned over on his side with a sigh and slept. Before he drifted off, he promised himself that if he had the chance to help the little Chimbeka learn the way of the white man with a pack of dogs, he would help. And Yellow Eyes, his belly full, sought a crevasse in a rocky ledge where he could curl up and sleep. Already he was picking his resting places with care. There must be an almost inaccessible trail to the hideout, a broken granite-blocked entrance, preferably on a high ledge. The cave need not be deep, for he slept near the entrance, but it must command a view of the country below. Yellow Eyes liked to lie at the entrance to a cave and let the sun heat his fur while his amber eyes surveyed the kingdom of spruce and aspen below. The satisfied curve of his lips always indicated that he considered the domain spread below as his kingdom, to be ruled and plundered and looted. The spot the little king cat had selected as a permanent home was all of these things. Yellow Eyes had used it upon a number of occasions and had begun to consider it his property. A great rift in the rock wall furnished an exit from above. Yellow Eyes never used that exit, but he knew it was there. Tonight he lay at the entrance and licked his paws. The stars above were clear and chill in their brilliance. In a meadow to the left he could hear the chomping of a doe feeding in the tall grass close to cover. A low snarl rumbled in his little chest, but he did not move. The day would come when such a sound would send him, belly to the ground, creeping into the night. In the cabin far down the mountain, Cougar George, the human, was making out a report to the predatory animal office. His stub pencil moved slowly. Writing was a painful process for the hunter. His underlip was caught between his teeth and beads of sweat stood upon his forehead. He had already reported one young cougar at large and was promising the destruction of the lion soon. Having signed his name, he sat back and lighted his pipe. He knew where he could pick up the cougar's trail the next day. After that trail had been followed a few hours, the hounds would learn their second lesson in cat trailing with an appropriate kill as a climax. These plans of the hunter were not to be fulfilled. A lobo wolf was to aid unknowingly the little spotted killer. While Cougar George, the human, was puffing contentedly on his pipe, the savage Old King Wolf was raiding a calf pasture below the hunter's cabin. For years, Cougar George had waged a bitter war against the gray killer. Cattle associations had rewarded posts for his pelt. Hunters trailed him, but he was wise and cunning. He avoided traps, and poison was not for him. His rule was to eat only a fresh kill, a kill he had made himself, and he seldom returned to the carcass after he left it. Each time he raided a calf pasture, angry requests came to Cougar George for the destruction of that killer, and each time the hunter went out and hunted for the gray one. Yellow Eyes could not be trailed because Cougar George and his dogs would be busy trying to kill the Lobo Wolf. And that's the end of chapter 5.